Well, guys, we are back for another episode of the Liberal Asshole Show, episode 45. So, what are today's topics?
Russo-Ukraine war update, Russia's perspective, Tucker Carlson supports violence against teachers, anti-choice idiots being stupid, progressive caucus snubbing needed Turner, and how close was Trump to overthrowing the 2020 election.
And there also was another topic that I just picked up earlier, but I forgot to put it on, and that's Starbucks' CEO coping about unions rising up. So that'll be funny to watch. I'm pretty sure I posted it in future. Yep, I posted there. So, of course, as always, the Russo-Ukraine war, as the map has had no changes, I think, from last week. And, of course, according to, have you ever heard of the Kievan Independent?
Yes.
Because I'm following their Twitter. They post, daily, casualty reports of what they've inflicted. And if their numbers are true, Russia now lost 20,000 troops at least now, officially.
Boy! Oh.
But of course, remember, like we keep saying, guys, don't ever believe either side's numbers. They have a very big reason to lie about inflate the losses they've inflicted and to downplay the losses they have. But that's what Kiev's Independent says. And of course, from Ukraine and NATO's and Americans' research, if you want to believe it, is somewhere casualties, which is death and injuries too, somewhere between 20 to 40,000 Russian casualties. And of course all the equipment they lost. And last I checked for Ukraine, it was somewhere between a few thousand up to 10,000. Which, God, even if it was on the low end for Russia and high end for Ukraine, that's pretty bad for Russia. They'll have more than double the casualties. And then of course, if you didn't hear the other day, a big Russian ship was destroyed the other day.
Man, that was awesome!
Yep, that was huge, because that was their main ship in the Black Sea, if I remember correctly. So that was good at taking down. But otherwise, there hasn't been really any changes, I think, since the last week we covered it. But of course, as long as the war keeps going, we're going to keep covering, because it's that important. So we got to say about since the last week we covered it.
So, remember, in war, the first casualty is always the truth.
Yes, like I said about the casualties.
So as a result, don't believe the numbers. So it's always somewhere in between, usually.
Yeah.
This is the static period where everyone is basically gearing up for the next round of conflict.
Yep. But of course, it hasn't happened yet. So
Russia's planning to launch a huge strike on the two breakaway regions and to try and finish Mariupol off.
But so far, nothing's happened yet. But hey, Mariupol holding on for a long time, because the last several days, everywhere I read mainstream media, Twitter and YouTube and all, they keep saying, oh, it's going to fall any day now, any hour. But it's still holding on. And as long as it holds on and ties Russia up, it'll make the other part 2 of the invasion take longer. So, keep holding on, make it longer for Ukraine to win, hopefully, and turn around. Alright, So, we've covered that now. Now we're going to go into the first video on the list. So, have you ever heard of the Caspian Report?
No.
It's a YouTuber, it's been around since 2011, does a lot of geopolitical videos. And really, really in-depth. One of the most in-depth people on YouTube, I think, I've seen that covers geopolitics. And he actually did a video. There's several videos on, Russia's perspective of what they want for, the Russo-Ukrainian war. I thought his was the best. So, we're gonna watch that now. Because it's pretty important.
Why is this happening? What could possibly justify invading a sovereign, independent state like Ukraine? The only way to answer this is by looking at things from a Russian perspective. Because in spite of the raging fight on the ground, the war is not really about Ukraine. It is about Russia and its pursuit of geopolitics. It is about the Kremlin and its relationship with the White House. One of Russia's initial demands for de-escalation just before the war erupted was for NATO to roll back from Eastern Europe. And that's what it ultimately comes down to. In many ways, the Ukrainian conflict echoes the Soviet collapse. There is certainly an element of nation building, culture and history that draws Russia and Ukraine to each other, but from a geopolitical lens, the war is bigger than Ukraine. It is about Russia attempting to restore the multipolar global order that was lost. Like a gambling man who makes a living out of false hope, Russia believes that it must either be a world power or there will be no Russia.
Yeah, I think someone I remember watching also covers before. Basically, Russia views that if they don't control all these areas, and if they don't become a world power, however, that they feel like they're gonna go extinct, they'll die basically. Just like they think what?
Okay.
And likewise, just like they think NATO is going to go after them, invade them.
Oh.
And even if all that stuff is not true or BS or anything, Russia's powerful enough that you must take their concerns into account. You can't just dismiss them, as I keep telling people.
Yep.
Today's video was sponsored.
Fuck the sponsorship. Don't give two craps about that.
Prescription or almost record. There will be when Union republics broke away and proclaimed sovereignty and independence. The main body, however, the newly established Russian Federation, had lost centuries of geopolitical strife. Russia had been thrown back to its 18th century territorial boundaries. All the sacrifices the Russian Imperial Army and the Soviet Red Army made were nullified on December 25, 1991, when the Soviet flag was lowered from the Kremlin and replaced with the flag of Russia. That was a hard pill to swallow, and an event that still haunts Russian foreign policy to this day. With the fall of the USSR came broken promises, plummeting healthcare, industrial decay, while kinship was replaced with hostility. And all those glorious technological marvels and infrastructure projects were left to rot. Tens of millions.
Yeah, as we covered over the last several episodes, the collapse of the Soviet Union was horrible for Russia. Russia going capitalism was horrible. In the span of just a few years, Russia's economy collapsed, being contracted by 50%, which was worse than the Great Depression. The whole country just died basically, to the point where even men and women too, but still the case with men pretty much, they live less longer than they did back when the Soviet Union was around, almost 10 years less longer than they used to.
Yes, I heard.
So people need to concede on this. It was just bad how Russia, the Soviet Union collapsed. Capitalism just did not work. It needed to be a gradual change like China did.
Millions of lives were lost with nothing to show for it. The death of the Soviet Union was the end of communism as a global force, but it also marked the end of Russia as a superpower. For having retreated from its Soviet borders, from its outer shell, Russia itself was severely exposed to dangers emanating from the West. Part of the Russian rationale for invading Ukraine is the Heartland Theory. Drafted in 1904 by Halford Mackinder, the Heartland Theory divides the world in three bodies. The first body is the world island, which consists of Europe, Asia and Africa. The second body refers to the offshore islands like the British Isles and the Japanese archipelago, while the third body points to the Americas and Australia as outlying islands. Within these parameters, there is special emphasis on the world island, because it is the most populous and resource-rich landmass. Imagine if a superstate controlled policymaking from France to China to Saudi Arabia to South Africa. That power would have the technological prowess of Europe, the resources of Africa, and the workforce of Asia. Nothing would stand in its way. So whoever controls the world island would have the means to dominate the globe. However, within the world island, there is the Heartland region, which extends from the Volga River to the Yangtze and from the Arctic to the Caspian Sea. This Heartland region is the domain from which a single power could dominate the rest of the world island, provided that the power enjoys stability at home. Russia is the power that sits at the center of this theory, which is why it resonates with Russian foreign policy. But it gets even more zealous. Further dissecting the world island is Eastern Europe. Mackinder's theory argues that the home territory of the Heartland power sits in Eastern Europe. So any power seeking global supremacy would emerge from the eastern half of the European continent. It's just about a nod to Russia. Now, Mackinder's theory initially served as a warning to the European powers, but instead became the manifest destiny of the Soviet Union. The Heartland theory was so powerful that it shaped the course of the Cold War, and it continues to dominate Russian geopolitical thinking to this day. For instance, Alexander Dugin, who is one of the most influential Russian political speakers, has consistently argued for a Russian-based Eurasian power. And the Russian policymaking elite, known as the Siloviki, still adhere to the Heartland theory. Admittedly, it seems strange to use a century-old geopolitical theory as a template in foreign policy. But one thing that keeps the Heartland theory relevant is the constituency of geography. The Earth has domain over humankind, not vice versa. So having control over Eastern Europe would allow Russia to reclaim its global footing. Ukraine is just the first pit stop. But beyond pursuing a multipolar global order, there are also local nuances at play. Extending from St. Petersburg to Kazan to Volgograd is the Russian core. 80% of the Russian population lives in this area, and much of the decision-making by the Kremlin is based on the needs and interests of its core. However, the terrain itself is flat and part of the European plain. This open, green plain widens as it stretches eastward. By the time the European plain reaches the borders of the Russian Federation, its width eclipses 2,000 kilometers. No amount of weaponry can fully defend such a vast, flat landscape. Seen in this...
Yeah, that's a historical thing with, like, Eastern Europe. It's all, like, flatland from, like, Germany all the way out to, like, the Ural Mountains.
Oh, yeah, that was Japan in World War One.
And World War II as well, Napoleon as well. Yeah. So, basically, the idea is, since that part of Europe is just a flat plain, any invading army could just plow right through Eastern Europe into Russia with really no, like, bound geographical, like, hindrance, like mountains, hills, or rivers and stuff like that, which usually do cause problems. Just like how America benefits from our geography, that we have two oceans surround us, so we have to worry about Europe and Asia. No one can hurt us, pretty much. Whereas Russia...
Australia.
Yeah, that too. And the UK as well, with the English Channel protecting them from the Nazis and such. But Russia does not have that geographical safe haven like other countries do. So because of that, and since the history, remember all the invasions they had, the Polish Commonwealth, Napoleon, Germany in both world wars, they view it as a vital security interest that they must have all of Eastern Europe subjugated under their control in some way in order to feel safe, just like how the Soviet Union had at the end of World War II. Without it, they feel threatened. Just like how when Cuba was aligned with the Soviet Union, had nuclear weapons there for a little bit, America freaked out, even though it really made no difference. You have to take that into consideration, and that's why they didn't want NATO to expand.
This way, the loss of the Soviet boundaries cost the Russians dearly, both politically and economically. Russia is forced to maintain a massive border with some of the most sophisticated militaries in the world. It has been a costly status quo. Accordingly, to reduce military spending, Russia needs to reduce its exposure along the European plain. To do that, however, Russian policymakers argue that the Russian state needs to anchor by the Baltic Sea and the Carpathian Mountains. Sitting along the northern rim of the European plain, the Baltic region is an interesting case. Individually, the Baltic nations lack the strength to threaten Russia, but the region as a whole acts as a conduit for great powers to exert pressure on the Russian core. From the Swedish incursion in the 18th century to the German invasions in the 20th century, plenty of European powers have tried subduing Russia by going through the Baltics. Today, however, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania are part of NATO, which places them beyond the reach of Russian subjugation. Be that as it may, geopolitics dictates that Russia take over the Baltics should the opportunity ever present itself. Doing so would allow the Russians to connect the Kaliningrad region to the Russian mainland without tiptoeing through or around NATO territory. Control of the Baltics would also strengthen Russia's presence and hold over the Baltic Sea at large. Meanwhile, the Carpathians present an auspicious foothold for the Russians, a buffer against marching armies. The arc, that is the Carpathian Range, is not impenetrable, but it does offer strategic depth to the occupying force in an otherwise flat space.
I know that firsthand too, because when I did my last MP on Vicky 2 on GSG, I was playing Austria, and Russia attacked me, and I won the war thanks to the Carpathian Mountains. They couldn't break my defenses.
If the European plain represents a highway for invading armies,
fighting area in particularly World War One, where the Austro-Hungarians were fighting a lot with the Russians on those mountains.
Yeah, whoever I had to join in that game to replace someone as Austria-Hungary, and Austria was like completely destroyed. They actually lost territory to Russia, and I rebuilt them really quickly and actually beat the shit out of Russia.
Carpathians is a speed bump in the middle of that highway. That strategic depth is priceless, and that consideration is the ultimate rationale for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. At the same time, it also means that the Russian objective in Ukraine is to take the entire country. So, as much as the rhetoric focuses on Donbass, Kharkiv, Kiev and Odessa, it misses the larger point. From the Russian angle, they need to push up to the Carpathian Mountains. So, Russia needs all of Ukraine, but also all of Moldova. When Lukashenko spoke with the members of the Belarusian Security Council, the map he used had an arrow
going Turks with the Caucus Mountains
into the Moldovan separatist region of Transnistria.
That's why they're going after
had
all
Russia
three countries.
Russia's military invasion of Ukraine gone more successfully, Moldova would have seen fighting as well.
But thankfully it's failed in that regard, so I doubt they're going to be able to take them over.
As we've learned, if they'd taken Ukraine, Moldova would have been next, and once they took over Moldova, they would have swung over and taken Georgia.
I mean, they still probably could go for Georgia too, remember?
Yeah, I suspect that was what they might... But actually, I remember that Putin, I think it was South Ossetia, and just pulled the same thing they pulled with Donetsk and Luhansk.
Yeah, that's what they did.
So Russia might actually be preparing to attack Georgia.
Yeah, they did that back in 2008, remember?
Georgia.
By and large, with the invasion of Ukraine, Russia sought to anchor by the Carpathians. By taking over all of Ukraine and eventually Moldova, Russia would have restored a portion of the Soviet boundaries, enough to reduce its exposed flank by the European plain to 600 kilometers, which is a substantial drop from the current 2,000 kilometers. Ideally, the Russians would want to push west as much as they can, preferably taking over all of Poland and the Baltics, but one step at a time. Ukraine is in a fight for its existence, and if Russia wins, the Baltics and Poland are next. Count on it. Likewise, if Russia loses the war in Ukraine, or it can't have all of it today, it will try again tomorrow. No treaty or ceasefire will last. Think of the European plain as a game of chess, where each player seeks to maximize the position of its pawns by strategically placing them. The further NATO pushes east into the European plain towards the Russian Federation, the more flexible its strategic planning becomes and the more room for mistakes it gains. A NATO-allied Ukraine would likely see cruise missile launchers on its soil, where flight time to the Russian core would be around 3 minutes.
And that's another reason why Russia does. And that's another reason why Russia does not want Ukraine to be part of NATO, because they're afraid of that, like nuclear weapons. Although I doubt they'd put nuclear weapons there if Ukraine was part of NATO, but But that's the fear that they have.
A build-up like that would force the Russians to spend even more on the military by establishing new bases deep in Russian territory. For instance, east of...
And another thing too, I remember it's also because of geographic. If like Russia's also afraid not only of that, but if like Ukraine became part of NATO and then hypothetically NATO did their invasion, remember, since they think that they're going to do that, they're afraid that they'll cut Russian too down by the Caucasus, and if Russia gets a lot of their resources from there, so if like they invaded like into the Caucasus and cut Russia in half, it would really cripple them. So that's another reason why they're afraid shitless of this.
Off the border of Ukraine, the flat terrain of the European plain continues uninterrupted for 750 kilometers to the shoreline of the Caspian Sea. This line, known as the Volgograd Gap, is fundamental to the existence of the Russian state. Should a hostile force close this gap, it would disconnect Russia from the Caucasus, the Black Sea, and the Caspian Sea. A NATO-allied Ukraine would certainly look to exploit that vulnerability. It wouldn't happen overnight, the build-up would be a steady process taking decades, but it would happen nevertheless. Having said that, the reverse is true as well. The more Russia pushes westward, the more secure the Russian core gets, the more room for error it gains, and the fewer options NATO has. So a Russian-controlled Ukraine would see the militarization of Poland, Romania, and the Baltic nations, even more so than at present.
Also,
from the Russian point of
Romania as well would be militarizing massively.
Yep, that's what you said too.
View that would balance.
Which one? I think probably Azerbaijan as well. With once Russia rampages into Georgia,
the scale of things.
Armenia would be like, please keep us safe, Mother Russia. Well, Azerbaijan would be like, F you.
All things considered, Ukraine is only one piece in Russia's
geopolitical... Armenia is, of course, allied with Russia, so they wouldn't.
Design.
But could Azerbaijan be able... Is Azerbaijan potentially eligible to join NATO?
I have no idea.
It's still a large piece, but one piece nonetheless. By taking over Ukraine and then Moldova, Russia believes it could lift itself as a premier global power while also securing its core demographic space. Going by this, for Russia it's either expand or die.
Yep. That's what they view it as, expand or die.
Russian policymakers, particularly the Siloviki, believe that political legitimacy comes from military conquest. They believe that peace is a lie, just another means of decay, like death by 1,000 cuts.
And we need to metaphorically beat this into his head that they are incorrect to think that peace is the best outcome for us. Oh, and that was a good video, but before we get to it, here's a really good comment someone posted to the very first one with almost 500 likes. No, 5,000 plus likes. It is baffling that Russia would focus exclusively on the geopolitical side of being a superpower when economic and technological prowess matters much more. But I guess achieving those would require fundamental changes to Russian kleptocracy, which its rulers don't want to make. But that also is why Russia will never be a superpower. Exactly. Russia lost its superpower status after the Soviet Union collapsed. They're not a great power, and as this war's going, I'm just still convinced that they're not even the most powerful country in Europe. Like, really? You're struggling against Ukraine and you're supposed to be a great power? Pfft. Oh my god, like, come on. If Russia was actually serious about making themselves better, you have to adopt into a social democracy like the rest of Europe and accept the reality how it is. You lost the Cold War, so deal with it. So, what do you have to say about that video?
That was very interesting. That very much understood Russia's perspective on it.
Now, of course, like
I said, with that, Azerbaijan could possibly be looking as like associated with NATO. Now, let me get this up.
Well, as you looked it up, now of course, just so you all know, because I'm sure a lot of idiots are going to say this is not justifying Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Nothing does. But In order to understand why this happens, you have to look at Russia's perspective too. You can't just dismiss it like a whole bunch of people do.
Yep.
And here's another thing too. A good comment someone did, and this is really true. Great video. Like Britain had to adapt after World War II, Russia has to adapt now. Posturing and bullying is not the way forward, and will inevitably end up with the destruction of Russia or possibly the world. Because yeah, guys, for all of you don't remember, the UK for like 100-something years was a superpower. They were the superpower before America was, but then they got weakened a little bit after World War I, and then World War II. They lost their superpower status. And you know what?
Yeah.
They had to deal with it. 70 years later, cope with it. Deal with it. The British are no longer a superpower, and likewise Russia. Likewise Russia, you need to accept it too. Adapt with the times like the British had to do. And likewise, just like Germany and Japan had superpower desires during World War II. But they lost so badly, we had beaten into them that they have to accept it. And now they're like one of the most economic superpowers in the world instead. So, yeah, you just gotta deal with how it is. And did you find the thing you wanted to look for?
Yeah. So, in regards to those countries, they're like associates of, like Azerbaijan's an associate of NATO, but is not actually a part of it. Same with Armenia, though Armenia is very unlikely to join due to their relationship with Russia. There's intensified dialogue with Georgia, which is not surprising considering that if Ukraine and Moldova had fallen, that Russia would have turned straight away to them.
Although, unfortunately, just like Ukraine, they probably won't be able to join because they have separatist breakaway regions too, remember?
Yeah, South Ossetia and the other one.
Yeah. So
which is also why Moldova can't either.
Oh, yeah, Transnistria.
Transnistria.
Yep.
As I said, I've said this before. If they took Ukraine, Russia was going to use the same thing they used on Ukraine, on Moldova, and then they were going to do the same thing on Georgia.
And also, too, since we forgot to mention, Sweden and Finland are trying to join NATO probably in the next few months, if you didn't hear that. Yeah, Sweden and Finland might try and join NATO now. Which, hey, you know what? Like I got to point out to Russia, that is all your fault. Because before you invade Ukraine, Sweden and Finland had no interest on joining NATO. Well, now they probably are now. Just likewise, Ukraine. They had no interest in joining NATO until you took Crimea. So, if you want NATO to not expand, which you say you're against, then you made it more likely to happen. That's why you shouldn't have invaded Ukraine in the first place, you fucking idiots. Like, you just need to accept the fact that you lost, and you have to accept the reality how it is. And just like I said several episodes ago, I feel like Russia's just like going through the same phase Germany had after World War I, if you noticed that.
Yes.
But unfortunately, my analogy, they would be like in the World War II scenario right now, and the only way to fix that would be to beat the shit out of Russia so badly in the war that they finally give up forever like Germany and Japan did, but that's impossible because of nukes.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way that's going to change is if Russia just implodes within itself and just accepts it. Alright, so now that we're finally done talking about the Russo-Ukraine war, let's go laugh at some idiots for once. And we're going to start off with Tucker Carlson, advocating violence against teachers. Oh my goodness. This is how bad Tucker Carlson has become, guys. Oh god, is it cringe.
Yeah.
I don't understand where the men are. Like, where are the dads? You know, some teachers pushing sex values on your third grader? Why don't you go in there and thrash the teacher? Like, this is an agent of the government pushing someone else's values on your kid about sex. Like, where's the pushback?
Well, one of the crazy things we know, Tucker, is that this is...
Tucker, I'm sure we've mentioned this before numerous times when we watch your episode, but why is it every time you bring on a guest and when they talk, you always make that stupid fucking face? Every single time!
It's because it's his default face now.
Oh my...
As he's Tucker Carlson.
Every single time you make that stupid
Hidden
face.
from parents. I mean, I agree with you. There should be a ton of pushback. I'm a father of 3 young kids, and I would get enraged if I found out this was happening at my kids' school.
Enraged if I
But you hear
learn
all these
about
crazy
gays
things
exist,
about,
guys.
5-year-old kids go into school as boys, but then they go into the magical closet and they come out as their gender affirming identity. Of course, that has nothing to do with the crazy lunatic who's pushing them on them. Of course, we're led to believe, of course, it's all coming from 5-year-old children. So one of the things we're learning, Tucker, is that this is being forced by some of these really radical teachers, and they're hiding it from the parents. That's maybe the most pernicious part.
That stupidity was a conversation that took place on national television between Tucker Carlson and J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance just said, unironically, that teachers are forcing students to be gay and trans. Where? Where is this happening? And if it happened, how many times? Once? Twice? That's not the way that it works. If you genuinely believe that someone can be taught to be gay or be forced into being gay or trans, you're a simpleton. You're stupid. You lack even an elementary understanding of human sexuality, and kids aren't being taught about sexuality in grades K through 3. But to these idiots, if you so happen to forget yourself and mention your wife and you're a female teacher, well, congratulations, you just turned that entire class gay and you groomed all of them into that lifestyle. So we have to...
Of course, conservatives are that brain-dead retarded to actually think that that's how it works. It doesn't, you idiots.
Protect our children against these groomers and, I don't know, pull them out of public schools and put them into private religious institutions. I can't help but think this new homophobic push is part of their scheme to, goad people into putting their kids in private schools.
You know, that actually is a fair point. That's happened before. I wouldn't be surprised if that is indeed the case.
I don't honestly know, but either way, if you listen to that conversation and you think that what they said made sense in any way, I have to think that you're a stupid person yourself, or you're just a sloppy thinker. You're not thinking about this. You're intellectually lazy. And in case you missed it, Tucker Carlson there very casually called for violence against teachers, as if their jobs aren't already shitty enough, where they get paid nothing, and now they have all these Karens like Tucker Carlson going to school claiming that, they're grooming students. Now he's saying do violence. He says, I don't understand where the men are. Like, where are the dads? Some teachers pushing sex values on your 3rd grader. Why don't you go in and thrash the teacher? What do you mean by sex values? Notice how
no, it's not going to be thrash. What do you mean go in there with a gun and kill them?
And probably kill kids, too.
Yep.
Whenever they have this conversation about sex values, it's incredibly vague. And this really is revealed in their hysteria about Disney being more inclusive, supposedly, of LGBTQ plus people. See, if you put a picture of 2 princes kissing or 2 princesses kissing, that's grooming. To them, that's tantamount to gay pornography.
Okay, and by that logic, would it be grooming if it was heterosexual couples kissing then?
Of course not, because all gay people are child rapists.
Then by your logic, heterosexuals are too.
Because they actually think that you choose to be gay, and
they're good because reasons and feelings.
If you just hide homosexuality and transgender identities away from children, then congratulations. Once they're 18, they would have chosen to be cisgender and heterosexual, and you've succeeded as a parent. Except it doesn't work that way, and I feel like most reasonable people who have any brain cells acknowledge this. But it's, Fox News, and they're pandering to the dumbest audience in America. So, of course, when they say something like this, the simpletons that tune into Fox News religiously every single evening, they won't question it. Now, the reason why the GOP is currently waging a war on teachers is because, as they've learned with the hysteria over critical race theory, that this is a politically potent method that gets normies to covertly adopt bigoted points of view, and it's a political winner for them, right? It's politically expedient to trot out this homophobic argument, this homophobic myth that gays are predators. But the problem is they're not actually protecting children, and I don't know if they're achieving this goal of getting parents to pull their kids out of public schools and place them in private religious institutions. I don't know what the intended effect that they want is, but we do know that what they're doing is making the lives of teachers hell currently, as Tyler Kincaid of NBC.
And not only teachers, LGBT students, and also lying to kids about sexuality, which they must know about, And so mild, banal, or anything like that. It's nothing to make a big deal about.
ABC News explains the school year at MacArthur High in Irving, Texas began.
They want the kids to be ignorant, so they won't tattle when they're abused.
And last fall, with the administration scraping off rainbow stickers that had been posted on campus, prompting hundreds of students to walk out and protest. 7 months later, LGBTQ students say things have deteriorated further. One faculty sponsor of the school's Gay Straight Alliance is facing having her contract terminated. Another is preparing to resign, and a third has been removed from the classroom. The Alliance's weekly meetings became monthly, and attendance dropped from about 40 students to fewer than 10. The student newspaper has functionally shut down. 2 teachers said that the school's principal asked teachers to take down gay pride flags in their classrooms and offices. Several students said that either they or their classmates have been called homophobic slurs and bullied, and school staff members have failed to intervene. Some said they're discouraged by the Irving Independent School District's response to the concerns they've raised through the Gay Straight Alliance and school board meetings, and they feel less safe at school than they did a year ago. 2 students said human resources officers with the district questioned them about their involvement with the GSA. LGBTQ students and teachers in the district said they've already been on edge because of the pressure schools across Texas and beyond are facing from politicians, parents, and activists to remove books with LGBTQ themes. They're also deeply worried about a state order calling for child abuse investigations into the families of transgender children, which was temporarily blocked by a judge.
And we actually talked about that and how heinous it was months ago.
Nationwide, educators have raised concerns that new measures, such as a Florida law that prevents teachers from discussing sexual
That's the Don't Say Gay bill.
orientation in third grade or lower, could lead to a purge of...
I love that in response, a whole bunch of teachers are not talking about, I think it's like not about talking about they're taking out books with heterosexual partners as well.
Yeah, by your logic, heterosexual couples are grooming kids, you fucking idiots. But of course, they're not either way. So, cry more and get over it.
LGBTQ teachers and advocates for LGBTQ students are alarmed by some parents' recent demands that schools prohibit students from organizing gay straight alliances, calling them pornographic and suggesting they would turn children gay. Now,
Yes. LGBT-themed books are pornographic. Yes. Exactly. Oh, and turning kids gay. Of course. Dude, we had this...
Instead of I don't want like them putting chemicals in the water, they turn the friggin' frogs gay. I don't like them putting books in the classroom, they turn the friggin' kids gay.
How many times do we have to bring up this stupid argument and refute it from back in the 2000s? You don't choose to be any sexuality, gay or straight. You're just being who you are. Just like when I found out when I was straight when I was 11. No one told me to do it. I didn't choose it. I just found out who I was, and I accept it. And likewise, you all need to accept that there are gays and trans in the world. So get over it.
Notice how the goalpost shifted. So it started, this national conversation specifically started with Republicans saying, we have to do this Don't Say Gay law because we have to protect children in grades K through 3. But now the conversation has broadened out. Now, gay straight alliances in high school, which are crucial resources for LGBTQ youth, now that's under attack as well because it's pornographic. And, teachers now are being targeted for putting up rainbow flags. Now, teachers who put up rainbow flags, that's not necessarily them saying, hey, I'm gay, I'm queer, everyone look at me. Oftentimes they'll do that so they can signal to students that they're allies. So if a student is dealing with a family that's homophobic, or if a student wants to come out and they don't know anyone safe to come out to, that teacher is saying, I'm a safe person to come out to. That could be a straight person. But now that teacher is being targeted. Now teachers who are LGBTQ at all, anyone who's seen as an ally, affirming of gay straight alliances in high schools, now they're being targeted. And one student in that article was quoted saying that they feel as if they're under attack, they're being targeted, and they're gender fluid. So what has started as, oh my God, we have to protect children, has essentially turned into an anti-gay witch hunt. And it didn't begin just this year. This has been brewing for quite some time. Back in 2021, we talked about how that was one of the most disgustingly transphobic
years. It's always been around. It's nothing new.
When it comes to state lawmakers introducing laws that either ban gender-affirming care for trans youth or ban trans high school students from participating in school sports. And it's only going to continue to get worse. And it's not just contained to certain states. Like, the Don't Say Gay law originated from Florida, but it's spreading throughout the country. As Reed Wilson of The Hill explains, lawmakers in Ohio and Louisiana have filed legislation that mimics the Florida law signed last month by Governor Ron DeSantis. In Texas, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who controls the state Senate, said he would make his state's version of the bill a top priority in the next legislative session. The Louisiana version would bar educators and school employees from discussing their own sexual orientation or gender identity with any student through 12th grade. There's no need for any child to ever know the private life of their educator, State Representative Dodie Horton, the bill's chief sponsor, told KSLA TV. It's not prejudice to one group or another, it just doesn't discuss it at all. Yeah. So remember how back in 2010, we all saw it as a huge accomplishment that Congress actually got their act together and repealed the violently homophobic Don't Ask, Don't Tell law, which basically forced members of the armed services into the closet indefinitely? Couldn't come out if you were a member of the military. Why? Well, because reasons. That's going to disrupt the military. How's that going to be in locker rooms? Will these, gay predators prey on their colleagues in the military? All those reasons. But we repealed it and moved on.
And not only that, it was actually very expensive. Because recently, Hunter Avalon debated some fucking batshit insane Christian fundamentalists about gays in the military. And he actually pointed out that them doing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I can't remember if it was in total for like 18 years, because that's how long Don't Ask, Don't Tell was around for, or if it was every single year. But he said he showed studies that it cost up to like $500 million in bureaucratic crap to do Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I have no idea if that was the entire time or was it every year. But even so, that's a lot of money being wasted on something that's not a big deal.
And we realized to force people into the closet is bigoted, it's bad, it's harmful. But here we are in 2022 bringing back Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It's just now it's applicable to teachers. They have to be silent about their identities so as to not groom the youths. Because in 11th grade, if you learn that your teacher is gay, you're automatically going to be gay yourself. Because I guess the teacher's going to...
Unfortunately, I've seen this argument used quite a lot, because if you all noticed, actually, I don't think we've mentioned before, but if any of you didn't know, like Gen Z, which is like the generation that's like in school still right now, they have had, it's like a massive spike like in LGBT representation compared to older demographics, if you didn't notice that. Yeah, it's so high that people are like, it's so high that they're being groomed and all that to choose to do that and all that. No, the reason why it's high is because they are in an environment that accepts them for who they are, whereas older generations, they were not allowed to be who they are, so they lied about it. That's why. Eventually, it's going to even out at the same number across everywhere. Just like it's only like 10% of the population is gay in some way. It's very small, and it's going to stay small, because most people are heterosexual.
To make it sound cool or something. I mean, it's a childish understanding of human sexuality and it defies reason. But the point is to be cruel. The point is to gin up homophobia for purposes of political expediency. This is what gets them the victory. Just saying, I don't like gay people isn't really going to be palatable politically in 2022.
Yeah, because I actually looked up a poll right now. Gay rights is like 70+% among Americans as of recently. So, yeah, you can't say you hate gays in America because everyone hates that. But when you bring up, we're protecting the kids, unfortunately, even for pro-gay people, that argument is very, very persuasive because Americans freak out about anything involving kids. Like, God forbid, you see how people freak out about video games still, for crying out loud. Like, they can't just think about for a little second. They just act like hive mind over it.
So the way that they create homophobia once again is by cloaking their homophobia in we have to protect the children. It's how they basically got people against teaching history with critical race theory, and you could take anything and turn it into we have to protect the children, and it's going to be a political winner because people, by and large, care about protecting children. I mean, who doesn't? But notice how they're weaponizing protecting children to bring back homophobia in a really...
Hell, I think we even covered in the last episode where they used think of the children when it came to not legalizing, decriminalizing weed nationwide, remember?
Yes, everything.
Yeah. Think of the children is not a good argument. Especially when it's something that they need to know about and it's not freaking sexual and other stupid crap like that.
Explicit way. I mean, homophobia never really dissipated, but attitudes towards LGBTQ plus people have improved over the years, not necessarily with regard to trans people. We have so much work to do in that regard.
Americans,
but homophobic attitudes...
We've covered a poll the last several years. Americans overwhelmingly support trans rights, if you don't know that.
Will return. And...
What?
I know that.
It's just, the problem is, it's not that Americans are homophobic, because as poll after poll after poll shows that Americans are pretty much liberal on every single issue in most cases. The problem is the politicians, like the Republicans in power, are against it. And since they keep winning, because one, they make very convincing arguments like the Don't Say Gay bill, and also the Democrats are so fucking weak that they don't get their base out to vote, which allows the Republicans to win and take over when they shouldn't be. That's the only reason why the country is like homophobic in that regard. If we actually weaken the Republicans so they can't win anymore as they shouldn't, this wouldn't be an issue anymore.
This isn't just like this new push for explicitly homophobic laws by the GOP, making this their priority. It's not just going to be contained to the United States. We will see a global increase in homophobia because of what the GOP is doing, because what the United States does, it has, consequences. It ripples throughout the world. Take a look at what happened to Evan when he was in Dublin. Last night, a stranger called me a faggot before beating the shit out of me. He left me with a fractured eye socket, 2 fractures in my ankle, a dislocation in my ankle, and some other minor injuries. We've come a long way, but still has such a long way to go in terms of equality. Now, I'm not saying that assault specifically was due to the GOP in America being relentless in their push for homophobic laws, but what I am saying is that we will see a correlation between this increased homophobic rhetoric and anti-LGBTQ hate crimes, violence against trans women. Like, these things go...
I don't think they're gonna, win and, flip, make, get rid of gay marriage or, make the approval go away, because Americans are overwhelming in that regard. I don't think they're gonna change that. What'd you say? That's pretty much set in stone right now. The only way they're gonna be able to do this is they forced it, like a Supreme Court decision or a law that forces gay marriage banned everywhere. And the majority of Americans, all but 2 states we covered, support gay rights. So everyone would be against that, for crying out loud. That would be a loser. They would never be able to recover ever again if they tried that.
Hand in hand, because politicians have a lot of influence.
Say that they won't try it.
Yeah, I actually looked up right now. This is on Wikipedia for gay rights in Ireland back in 2008. Shows 84% of Irish support civil marriage or civil partnerships, and 58% for gay marriage. Let's see if there's any more recently. If Wikipedia would catch up, because they legalized gay marriage only a few years ago. Remember that?
Yes, I hear that.
So a 2019 Eurobarometer found that 79% of Irish thought same-sex marriage should be allowed. That's even more than America. So, based.
Wow, that's awesome.
So, don't let the thing what happened to that person in Ireland, unfortunately, cloud your judgment. Most people in Ireland, and America too, are against that shit.
And power. And when they, cultivate this homophobic sentiment, the population usually follows their lead. Now, in 2022 alone, there's been more than 240 anti-LGBTQ plus laws introduced in state legislatures across the country, specifically in 31 states, as this graphic by the Human Rights Campaign illustrates. And at this rate, 2022 is shaping up to be one of the most anti-LGBTQ years, legislatively speaking, at least in modern history, because, this is kind of the way that progress works. A lot of people have this view of progress that it's linear, but that's not necessarily the case. You don't always charge ahead in one direction. Sometimes you make progress, sometimes you go backwards. Take 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. We're currently in one of those eras where we're making a lot of moves backwards, where we're regressing at a rate that's shocking. And it's not just regression with regard to LGBTQ plus issues. When it comes to women's rights, we have states just passing straight up bans on abortion at this point
Which
in the
is
year
illegal
2022.
and
But this is what the
unconstitutional, so they can't
GOP
do
is
that.
doing. Their goal is to inflict as much pain and suffering on America because they are psychopaths. People who vote for this party, they're bad people. They are morally defective. If you support this party, then I don't know what's wrong with you. I have to think.
I don't know if I would go that far with Mike saying, because there are a lot of people that either are stupid enough to buy their propaganda, like the, about the kids thing, like we talk about. I wouldn't necessarily call them horrible people. I would call them more like ignorant. And there are people that are so politically ignorant that it's like Vosh said, like a coin flip. You have to be very careful when you say stuff like that, because if you say that, you're never ever going to convince people to like vote for progressives, basically. So you have to be extremely careful with that rhetoric, Mike.
That you just are cruel and you enjoy it because the Republican Party, time and again, has shown you who they are. They're no longer the party of, tax cuts for small businesses. Not that they ever were, but this party, their whole goal is to troll, is to be unnecessarily cruel and to inflict pain on people. That's the goal of the GOP. This is a party of fucking monsters. And if you still vote for this party, knowing who they are, that says a lot about who you are as a person as well. So this is going to continue, and I would argue this is probably only the beginning. Their homophobia and bombastic rhetoric that we're seeing on Fox News and other right-wing outlets is only going to get worse. You think that this is the lowest that they'll stoop to? Trust me, they will go even lower because that's who they are. They're fucking monsters, and the only thing that we can do is push back against them vociferously. Because what little gains we've made when it comes to LGBTQ plus rights, you always have to fight to protect. Because if you just simply, you accomplish something, you achieve progress, and you step away, well, bad actors are going to target that progress and try to take you back. And I think a lot of people in this country got comfortable thinking, well, the issue of LGBTQ plus equality, at least when it comes to gays, is solved. But no, that never was the case. And these attacks on trans people that never ceased was a sign that they were also going to try to make this a broader attack on all of the LGBTQ plus community. It was just a matter of time. So you can never get comfortable. When it comes to civil rights, you always have to be committed to fighting, because there will always be reactionary forces that try to take you back. And this is something that will never change. I just hope that people learn from this and they acknowledge that, you always have to fight to protect these gains. And I'll leave that there.
And of course, here's another thing too about the Republicans. For all of you who don't know, there's also the young Republicans, which are Republicans around our age, like in the 20s and such. There have been polls all the way back since like 2014 showing that they overwhelmingly support gay rights too. So, most of the people that are crying about like gay rights, wanting to take them away, they're mostly boomers and old fucks that are gonna die eventually, and people in charge are just fucking whiny Christian fundamentalists that majority of Americans are just dismissing as the years go on because the country's becoming less religious. Eventually, they will lose because they're not going to have the population on their side, which they already don't have the population on their side. It's just the population isn't going out in droves to vote them out because they're not politically franchised enough to do so, because partly of the Democrats too. All right, so what do you have to say about that video?
That was very interesting.
And of course, Tucker Carlson advocating violence. That's something that should maybe get him off the air now, finally, because that's not based even for a free speech.
He's never getting off the air, sadly.
Yep. Until he dies or says something even more stupid.
He's literally been on friggin' MSDN. He was on MSDNC at one point.
Yep. Hey, maybe we'll find out if he did some sort of sexual harassment or assault on Fox News. It's pretty sad that it would require a Me Too. It's pretty sad that it would require possibly a Me Too to get rid of him. But him advocating violence, supporting white replacement theory, none of that works. But sexually assaulting women, that can work, but not this. It's really weird. Alright, so now, let's see the next topic. Oh, this is a video that you posted. Anti-choice idiots being stupid from TYT. So, since it's a video you brought up, what's the topic?
Okay, let me just grab this. Where is it? Where is it?
Future episode ideas.
Oh, this is the one that I think this is the one where she either stole from like bought them or something from abortion clinics and then buried them or something. Buried them, and it's like, oh.
All right, let's watch TYT and cringe in both regards.
The creepy anti-choice activist who was arrested last week because authorities found 5 fetuses in her Virginia home now claims that she and her activist buddies have buried more than 100 fetuses that they somehow obtained. Now, the fetuses, Lauren Handy, that's the right-wing zealot here, claimed were among the 100 others recovered at the abortion clinic in Washington. So she claims that she obtained them at this abortion clinic in Washington. Apparently, she said this: during the 5 days they were under my stewardship, the 115 victims of abortion violence were given funeral mass for unbaptized children, and 110 were given a proper burial in a private cemetery.
Yep.
Now, none of this has been confirmed, and in fact, the way that she purports to have obtained these fetuses is it's being questioned. Okay, so she says after what she described as a mass burial at an undisclosed location, Handy claims she ultimately arranged for the medical examiner to pick up the 5 fetuses. No, she didn't. She's just such an insane liar. She got arrested. She didn't hit up the medical examiner and be like, yo, buddy, I got 5 fetuses. No, that's not. Anyway, but let me keep going. This woman's insane. Alleging they had wounds consistent with a violent crime. But Handy and her activist friend said that they even tried unsuccessfully to find a private pathologist to examine the fetuses. The medical examiner's office did not immediately respond to the Daily Beast request for comment. Now, they had later said, John, that the way that they obtained the fetuses was there was a driver who picked them up from the clinic and was supposed to take them to like an incinerator or something. They intervened and convinced the driver to hand the fetuses over to them. Now, the company in which this driver is employed denies this wholeheartedly. The driver, Curtis Bay Medical Waste Services, denied the group's account.
I remember correctly, it's even stupider.
Oh, jeez.
They stated that the employee took the boxes from the Reproductive Health Center in Washington State and delivered them to the group's incineration facility. But it's the most bizarre story. So I don't know how she got a hold of the fetuses. She is on the record in various interviews admitting to encouraging minors to commit crimes associated with their activism because they're minors. All of that will just be expunged from their records later. She's crazy and she's committing crimes and thinks that there's nothing wrong with it.
That actually is a crime too. What was encouraging delinquency of a minor or something like that? Oh, jeez, this bitch is insane.
It's like an activism legal strategy, like thinking that a husband and a wife can't be convicted for the same crime. It's like, I don't think you've done as much research as you think that you have. Her cover story, all of the cover stories here are absolutely absurd, but I think we should give them a shake. So you convinced the driver to hand them over. What is that? That sounds like you hijacked it. It sounds like you threatened him. I don't think that you sat him down and had a talk about philosophy and your anti-abortion ideology. It sounds like you hijacked him. I don't think that happened. I think that they snuck into the truck or something and stole it. And I will also say it's sort of weird because I did an interview just a couple of weeks ago with a lawyer who represents families suing a variety of different groups or individuals that are involved in the black market for human bodies and body parts. It was connected to that story about a box of human heads being stolen out of a truck recently. And he said that it's quite frequent for people to steal things that are being either moved to be incinerated or for the actual people doing the incineration to pretend to incinerate things, but then sell on the black market the body parts, either for illegal medical experimentation, in some cases selling heads to terrorist groups for use in propaganda videos. So why not fetuses for videos like this? If you can make a little bit of extra money, I doubt those people are rolling in it. But the fundamental problem for me isn't even necessarily the 5 that she's claiming there were violent crimes done to. I don't even know what the theory there is, that a woman was attacked, stabbed, and then decided that rather than go to the hospital, she went to get an abortion done. It's a maddening theory. But the 100 that they buried, like, you are allowed to have your own religion. As you famously have gone viral in saying, I respect and support your right to have your religion. But that right ends at you performing illegal, non-consensual religious ceremonies on the dead bodies of people whose family wouldn't want you to be within a mile of that fetus. And if you can't see that everything that you've done, everything that you've said to cover it is absolute madness, then I don't know how we're supposed to communicate with people. These are not religious values. This is psychoses being acted out via activism.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think what's also concerning, if you take a step back and look at the broader picture, is that zealots and insane people like Handy are winning across the country. And it's not because of the law breaking or the activism carried out by people like Handy. It's because of how well organized, how well funded, and how strategic the right wing has been in ensuring that their judicial nominees get confirmed. Okay, all these conservative federal judges, they matter. Whether you find it boring or not, the Supreme Court and the nominees that get confirmed matter.
Yeah.
It matters that Trump got elected and succeeded in confirming 3 rabid right-wing judges who will hand down one pro-corporate decision after another.
Well, don't forget, one was stolen by Obama. Remember that? That was
stolen.
The first one was stolen by Obama, so it should have been only 2. And also, you can't use that as a justification to blame people for not wanting to vote for Hillary, which you at TYT do all the time.
Yes.
And also,
because as we mentioned before, if Hillary won, the Republicans would have obstructed her from nominating a Supreme Court justice the entire time, because they had the House and the Senate pretty much the entire time. And instead of the Democrats winning in 2018, the Republicans would have won, so she would never have had any nominee happen. So
they would have literally been like, right, as soon as they got in, they would have gotten rid of all 9 justices, and then put in 9 extreme right justices and overthrown the country that way.
And this is part of a good reason why TYT isn't as good as it used to be, because they've gone to shitty.
Very likely will be able to allow severe restrictions on reproductive rights to pass in various red states across the country. And I just want to give you one of the more recent examples. This is in Oklahoma. Keep in mind that women in Texas who can no longer get an abortion as a result of that state effectively banning it have been traveling to Oklahoma to get the reproductive health that they need. Well, now Oklahoma has just passed legislation. The Senate had already passed it, but the state house has also just recently passed legislation flat out banning abortion.
Which is unconstitutional.
The governor is very likely to sign it. It will be implemented into law. And what are we gonna do? We're gonna hope that this right wing, Supreme Court is gonna strike it down. They might. There's one element to this story that gives me a tiny, tiny bit of hope. But at this point, I feel like optimism is a ridiculous thing to have. So let me give you the details on how they're doing this. The Oklahoma State House recently passed the bill modeled on the controversial Texas abortion ban, which lets individuals sue anyone over illegal abortions. And abortion rights supporters and opponents were expected to battle it out over the legislation. But, this is the but, instead of advancing that bill, the House instead passed a more straightforward abortion ban, which would be enforced by the government in a 70-14 vote. The state Senate originally passed this bill last year. Now, the reason why I say that there's a little bit of hope here is because modeling legislation like that, where it's an outright ban that would be enforced by the government, there's precedent for that being unconstitutional.
Yeah, so the Roe v. Wade makes it unconstitutional, so they can't do it no matter what.
The hope is that our right-wing Supreme Court will uphold precedent on this matter, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, if they were anything other than the ideologues they were chosen to be, there's no way that this novel mechanism, the turning everything into a bounty, financially incentivizing.
I like how this went from making fun of some anti-choice idiots, and now it's pretty much just about abortion rights now.
The Karenization of our justice system. There's no way that that would actually fly with
John,
the
did you say the Karenization?
mechanism, the turning everything into a bounty, financially incentivizing the Karenization of our justice system. There's no way that would actually fly with the Supreme Court. But it is a very interesting open question about whether in the end it will. I mean, they've been chosen to deliver results, to deliver, as you pointed out, financial results. That's the main reason they were chosen. And maybe you throw like a true believer like an A.B. Coney Barrett on there because she'll deliver for the religious stuff. This is the abortion stuff. God only knows what the Supreme Court will end up allowing in terms of the trans community. That is bread and circuses. It is designed to placate the right-wing masses so that the elite Republicans that the populists say they're against but are part of the group could get away with murder, never worrying about their taxes ever going up, never worrying about regulation on their businesses, allowing actual elected officials to get away with murder when it comes to their the relationship that they have with donors, both while they're in office, their ability to monetize their former positions once they move out of office, and their ability to enrich themselves by playing the stock market while they have the ability to put their thumb on the scale. Like, it's an amazing rigged system for the limited number of people that are already on the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And of course, I mean, we've brought up the hypocrisy so many times. We're talking about a right wing that on one hand claims to be pro-life, but doesn't want to do anything on a federal level, certainly when it comes to gun control. I mean, even on a state level, they don't even want to do simple background checks. They love the loopholes.
Unfortunately, Anna, your argument doesn't really work well in that regard because they support personal freedom in all regard. A better argument instead would be, if you're against abortion so much, why don't you support sex education, free contraceptives? That actually lowers the abortion rate, so less abortions would happen.
They don't think about that or care because, as I said, part of it is that they want to enable continued child sexual abuse.
But yeah, that's more of a better argument, and what you're
that allow people, all sorts of dangerous people, to purchase guns with no checks and then carry out violent crimes, murders, situations where people get killed. But those lives don't matter. They love cutting funding to programs that help keep children in poverty healthy and alive, including the food stamp program. And let's also not forget one of the other big stories of the day. Remember, Senate Republicans are refusing to vote in favor of COVID funding legislation.
Yeah.
By the way, they're not sending you money. All it would do would essentially help people who need to get COVID testing, COVID treatments, vaccinations. It would ensure that those things remain free. They don't care though,
because it's a Chinese hoax, remember?
And alive. And remember, it's the right wing that's fighting against that.
Yep.
So they're hypocrites. It's not about a pro-life movement. It's all about power.
And not only them, but the corporate Democrats, which I'm sure TYT would not be too happy about getting rid of now.
And control. And that is what we're seeing playing out in many red states across the country.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks.
Shut up, Cenk. Shut up, Cenk. Don't want to hear you right now. So we got to say about this, since you brought it up. Just another.
Oh, it was pretty fucking. As I said, it was pretty insane. There's no part of what the hell they'll do.
And funny thing, I was actually looking this up too while we were reading it. So this is what I read up on a DC-based news thing. Medical waste company and anti-abortions group photos deny transporting fetal remains. This is the person too that I were talking about. I looked it up because this happened only like a few weeks ago. So yeah, to me it just sounds like another anti-batshit insane person, probably involved with James O'Keefe, trying to get rid of Planned Parenthood like they tried to do with the baby parts crap with Planned Parenthood back in 2015. Nothing more of an idiot in that regard. Mostly just became about abortion rights afterwards, like the rest of the video. Alright, so now let's see the next topic. Now we're going to have to get angry. Progressive Caucus snubbing Nina Turner. So, I don't know if we covered this, but I think it was last week. Nina Turner is actually going to run for the same seat in Ohio she ran last time. Yay!
Yep.
About time she runs against Chantal Brown's pathetic ass. Hopefully this time she will win. Because we need her badly in power because she will fight hard. Unlike Chantal Brown's corrupt ass. But of course, the Progressive Caucus, not only did they not endorse or support Nina, they supported Chantal Brown. Oh my fucking god. So now, time to get very, very, very angry. So, this is infuriating.
So previously on the show, I've outlined the issues that I have with the Congressional Progressive Caucus. I think it's largely a caucus in Congress that isn't very progressive. I mean, certainly all of the most progressive members of Congress are part of the CPC. The problem is that this is usually an organization that launders the reputation of corporate Democrats. And a lot of corporate Democrats who aren't actually progressive will join the Congressional Progressive Caucus, so that way they get shielded from some sort of insurgent left.
Yeah, that's what we said before. A lot of the progressives in Congress are, unfortunately, a lot of them are just way too weak, and they will try desperately to suck up to the corporate Democrats and try and be friendly with them.
They've got no ability to fight.
Yeah, but here's the thing, guys. You can't be friends with them. Just like the Republicans.
No, you've got to make them hate you.
Yeah, they're gonna hate you no matter what.
You've got to be attacking them every chance you get.
Like, look
even if it's unnecessary.
Yeah, look how they.
You gotta attack them. You gotta attack them as viciously as possible too.
Like, look how they
make them unpalatable as possible.
Like, look how bad the corporate Democrats treated Bernie and AOC over the last several years. They hate Bernie and AOC. You don't suck up these people. You destroy them.
Democrats like scum.
That's why we keep saying we need a progressive Trump, which, hey, Nina Turner is somewhat like that. So that's why we need her to win.
This primary challenger. And it's an issue. And what they need to do is clean house. They need to actually have more standards in the CPC to make sure that they don't bring in people who are trying to sabotage the leftist progressive agenda. Now, what they did today, really, I feel like it should be the last straw for people if they didn't already know how bad the CPC is. So they announced their slate of primary endorsements for 2022, and one of the individuals is Chantal Brown. Now, for those of you who don't know, Chantal...
The CPC are corporate Democrats at this point.
Yeah,
just
or... Best case scenario, I guess you could say they're like too weak to fight back, because this is just pathetic.
Brown is being primaried by a leftist candidate named...
the benefit of the doubt anymore.
And you know what else, too? This, unfortunately, helps people like Dorr, Harry, Hinkle, and all of them.
This gives the doorknobs more ammunition.
Because you guys refuse to have standards.
They get more ammunition. So then they get the reinforcements. That also helps the Republicans.
Yeah.
Nina Turner, might have heard about her. She's a star in the progressive movement. And they endorsed Chantal Brown over Nina Turner. And the press release reads, "We're proud to support and endorse this group of bold, progressive leaders that are fighting for working people in their communities and across the country," said CPC PAC co-chairs Mark Pocan, Pramila Jayapal, and Jamie Raskin. Each and every one of them is working every day to take on corporate special interests, what a joke, fight for economic and social justice, universal health care, climate action.
You support, you want to fight against corporate special interests, yet you support Chantal Brown, who's one of them. Okay, shows how much you're cucked so hard.
And bold solutions to the urgent crises facing our country. We are thrilled to support their campaigns and look forward to continuing to build the progressive movement alongside them in Congress. Now, the idea of Chantal Brown taking on corporate special interests is so absurd that it's laughable because her campaign was bankrolled by special interests, and we'll get into all of that.
And also Republicans too, guys. So a progressive Democrat supported by big money Republicans. How is that not a giant red flag?
But to give you some additional context, as Daniel Moranz of HuffPost explains, Chantel Brown joined the CPC back in January. So to a lot of people, I think it just seems logical for them to endorse one of their own members. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to protect their incumbents who are part of the CPC. They want, a huge list of numbers, and so they're going to endorse people who are part of the caucus. The problem is that they're prioritizing numbers and just their own membership over the actual policies itself. I mean, the whole point, in theory, of the Congressional Progressive Caucus is to promote progressive policies. But when you are endorsing corporate Democrats over people like Nina Turner, who actually supports progressive policies, then that's an issue. And as David Dill points out, the biggest issue here is that Chantel Brown was allowed to join the Progressive Caucus at all, as the caucus is always going to endorse sitting members. Brown joined a month after joining the business-friendly New Democrat Coalition and a day before Nina Turner announced her run. So Chantel Brown, she gets elected to Congress after getting a surge of corporate money, and she has her feet...
Just start taking corporate PAC money just so we can confirm that you're a corporate Democrat.
In both cookie jars. She's part of the centrist, corporate-friendly New Dem coalition, and she's also part of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Now, she's part of the Congressional Progressive Caucus not because she is progressive, but because she knew that after running a contested primary against Nina Turner, there would be a high likelihood, that Nina Turner would run against her again. So how do you shield yourself from the left? Well, you join the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and you pretend to be a progressive. You make sure that they don't endorse your future primary opponent. And that's exactly what Chantel Brown did, and the CPC leadership fell for it. As David Dill pointed out, she should have never been admitted to the CPC, not only because she's part of the New Dem coalition, which is corporate, but also because of all of the things that she did to get elected in the first place. I mean, let's just take a quick recap of the issues here. So Chantel Brown's first campaign was funded by a fossil fuel oligarch and right-wingers, including Trump allies, and she not only had a super PAC and still has a super PAC, but she walked a legal fine line by publicly begging a super PAC, specifically a pro-Israeli apartheid super PAC, for campaign contributions when Nina Turner was outraising her with
Palestinian PAC. Great.
Oh, that's right. I think we even covered her that people kept calling Turner a anti-Semite. I think we covered that when she ran or something like that.
He's committed to oppose Israel's far-right government genociding the Palestinians.
Small dollar grassroots donations. Now, that's not even to mention the conflicts of interest and potential quid pro quos with her campaign donors, and how one consulting firm in particular, ran by her partner, helped her out after she helped them out. And all of this led to an ethics probe. And as Newsweek explained in an article from last year, in April, The Intercept reported that Brown, a Cuyahoga County council member, had voted to award millions worth of contracts to companies connected to her romantic partner and campaign donors. Emails reviewed by the Daily Poster showed that the Ohio State Auditor's Office reviewed the allegations in the article and recently referred the matter to the State Ethics Commission. Under Ohio law, public officials are prohibited from knowingly authorizing or using their authority or influence to secure authorization of any public contract in which the public official, a member of the public's official family, or any of the public official's business associates has an interest. Violation of the statute is a felony, and penalties can include prison time. So all of that happened. Chantel Brown ended up beating Nina Turner, and then the Congressional Progressive Caucus welcomed her with open arms.
Basically,
and look, I understand.
You're going to accept corporate Democrats and become more like corporate Democrats.
That we want to
which unfortunately is the same argument that doorknobs use.
Change people's minds. We want to bring them over to our side and
proving the doorknob point. It's making it. They're just emboldening Republicans.
Yeah, you gotta not do this. You have to have standards.
Get them to support the policies that we support, but anyone with functioning brain cells left in their head can see that Chantel Brown didn't have a sudden change of heart. Her joining the CPC is an obvious cynical ploy to kind of placate the left and stop the CPC from endorsing her future primary opponent, Nina Turner. And unfortunately, it worked. And Pramila Jayapal, the leader, where the buck stops with her, She took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. Back in February, she tweeted out, Medicare for All is now officially co-sponsored by 118 members of the House. So glad to have Representative Chantel Brown on board as we build this movement to finally guarantee health care as a human right. Wait,
so
she ran
naive.
against Medicare for All, and you're celebrating her co-sponsoring Medicare for All?
This is another thing that's a problem with them. Not only are they way too nice, they're also way too naive in thinking that they're actually going to support this. Like, come on! Chantel Brown was against Medicare for All during the primary against Nina Turner. Nina Turner was the one that supported Medicare for All, for crying out loud. How the hell do you buy this bullshit? It's called They Lie. How do you not see this?
They lie everything.
That's why forced to vote was needed. That way we can expose them when they actually vote for against it. Then we can use as ammo against them. But of course, all the Vosh and all the other stupid actual shit libs were against that actual good reason.
Bags who hate it, who are just corporate Democrat.
Even though it's clear that she's doing this cynically so she has plausible deniability when she has a leftist challenger. I mean, even if Nina Turner wasn't challenging her, she's a centrist who would inevitably face a leftist primary challenger. And you're like celebrating her. You're doing PR for her, Pramila Jayapal. Now I get like Pramila Jayapal, Medicare for All is her signature piece of legislation. So of course she's going to celebrate co-sponsors. But again, like you have to draw the line. You have to have some standards as to who you admit into the Congressional Progressive Caucus. I mean, and
likewise, I have standards for who I vote for, which is why, unlike you, Mike, even though you were in a blue state, I refused to vote for Biden last time. Because I'm not going to vote for a neo-lib like him.
Let me just say, co-sponsoring Medicare for All is not...
We're not voting for a terrorist.
Which is still pretty sad, Mike, that you would vote for Biden, because Oregon is a blue state, too. It was going to win and go to Biden no matter what, so I don't understand why you vote for it.
As I've said it before, I would only go blue, if I was in a swing state. Like if I was in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, maybe Florida. I'm not sure on Florida.
Florida's like the most purplest state in the world, for crying out loud.
Yeah, so probably would be. Yeah, so like I said, the Rust Belt states and Florida would probably be the only states I'd vote for Biden for, and that's only because they are swings. They are the big swing states.
But remember, I'm a Nazi and a fascist for not voting for him in my state.
And then the rest of us, no. Remember, you vote for Biden. You're a neo-Nazi. You support neo-Nazi who's worse than Hitler.
Oh, Vosh will be very angry if you point that out to him.
Not evidence that they support Medicare for All. Tim Ryan co-sponsored Medicare for All, and then when he ran for president, he was asked by a reporter if he'd support it because he was running against it, but yet he co-sponsored it, and he said, no, I would vote against it. But he co-sponsored it, so doesn't that seem a little bit bizarre? Well, no, because these politicians will pretend to support policies to get the left off their backs and to placate the left, when in actuality, if it came up to a vote, they wouldn't support it. And Pramila Jayapal is just letting Chantel Brown pretend to be a progressive so she insulates herself from a leftist primary challenger or criticism from the left. And I mean, at this point, with their standards, let's pretend that Joe Manchin decided that he doesn't want to be a senator, he's stepping down, and he's running for the House of Representatives. It's Joe Manchin, so we all know him, or Kirsten Sinema, any of these corporate Democrats, right? Let's assume they got elected, ran as a centrist, functionally campaigned as a Republican, but when they got elected, they chose to join the Congressional Progressive Caucus because they co-sponsored Medicare for All. Would you let Joe Manchin join, even though you know he definitely doesn't support Medicare for All, and he's just co-sponsoring this piece of legislation to placate the left and insulate himself from a leftist primary challenger? I mean, where do you draw
corporate Democrats as well?
The line? Are you just going to let anyone in? Can a Republican join the Congressional Progressive Caucus if they happen to support Medicare for All when they're clearly not a progressive? I mean, you have to have some fucking standards. And the leadership of the CPC has failed here. Now, the CPC is big, and you'd think, oh, wow, that's good because there's so many progressives here in Congress. But these aren't progressives. These are people who are part of centrist caucuses and people who are trying to protect themselves from primary opponents that, challenge them from the left. So draw the fucking line somewhere. So why is Pramila Jayapal allowing this to happen?
I drew
Why
a
is
line,
she
but I
letting
got called a Nazi
her
for it.
Congressional Progressive Caucus to become the laughingstock of the nation? Well, David Sirota has a theory. He wrote, "Let's be clear, this is very likely Pramila Jayapal selling out the entire movement because of her unbridled ambitions to get a fancy but meaningless leadership title among a House Democratic caucus that will be obliterated in the midterm elections. A total betrayal on every
the entire Progressive Caucus because she's become a corporate Democrat.
level." Now, maybe that's the case. I don't know. I can't speculate about her motivations, but what I can speak to is the things that she's done to show that she is not very savvy politically and when it comes to strategy. So all of last year...
Yeah, that's another thing, too, is a lot of the progressives in power are just stupid at strategizing. Oh, my God.
But, well, as in they don't
started
know
off
how
really
to.
strong when it comes to Build Back Better. And she was keeping the Congressional Progressive
Down
Caucus
voice,
together,
you mean?
saying we're not going to vote for the bipartisan infrastructure proposal unless the Senate agrees to pass Build Back Better. Get us climate change legislation, universal, pre-K, all of that. And then what happened? Well, after enough pressure, she buckled. And just 6 members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the squad plus a couple of others, they held strong. They did what they promised they would do. But after Pramila Jayapal caved to pressure from Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and made a fool of herself, she embarrassed herself even more by pretending as if
literally 13 Republicans then voted for it, and at least 2 have literally said they voted for it to own AOC.
We were keeping our word. We held strong, and we didn't buckle. And also, we're the winners throughout this. We actually won, and we owned Manchin. Like, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but you can go back and look at the videos where we talked about her talking about this. And it's not just her. It's also Ro Khanna who said the same thing. But she's the leader of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. So, what she does, this caucus will follow suit in theory, right? And she tried to reframe this as a win when it was a clear loss. And time has proven us right. It's proven that her strategy was a failure because does anyone remember Build Back Better getting passed by the Senate? No, it didn't, because she failed to keep her caucus together. So Pramila Jayapal is a great lawmaker. She writes excellent legislation. Her Medicare for All bill is better than the one that Bernie Sanders proposed. Not by like a ton, but it has a lot of provisions that are a lot better in the long run. And I would want Bernie Sanders' version to match Pramila Jayapal's version, right? So she's a good lawmaker. The problem is that she's not a leader. She's not a leader. You have to have backbone to be a leader. You can't cave at the second there was going to be pressure from Joe Manchin. You can't allow anyone into the Congressional Progressive Caucus when they're clearly not progressives, and in fact they're pretty corrupt, facing ethics probes. You can't allow this to happen, otherwise the ideology of the caucus gets watered down and its effectiveness gets erased in Congress.
In here before
and you get nothing accomplished. So under your leadership, Pramila Jayapal, when you had the opportunity with Democrats in power, what have you achieved?
Fucking
nothing.
Democrat
you achieved nothing. So if I were Pramila Jayapal, I would no longer be in leadership after failure after failure. I would resign if I were Pramila Jayapal in shame. Now that's not to say that like we should go after Pramila Jayapal as leftists, because again, she's a good lawmaker. The problem is that she's not a leader.
Slandering, smearing, and defaming her every chance we get until we should be destroying her reputation with her constituency, so they'll vote her the fuck out.
You know what? I think she actually represents too? Mayumi.
Corporate Democrats.
I think she represents Mayumi too.
Good. Then she can help with destroying that corporate Democrat's reputation with the people in the thing, and so it can help get rid of that fucking corporate Democrat careerist grifter.
Yep. When you fuck up this bad, you do need to eventually face a primary, just like we have to do with Warren eventually.
Yep.
Like when you fuck up, you don't get a pass because you're progressive. If you don't do what we want, even you will face some sort of primary challenge, and you need to.
Right, and that's fine, right? Not all people have leadership qualities, right? But you have people in Congress who are leaders. Cori Bush is always holding strong. She held strong with Build Back Better. Jamal Bowman, he doesn't get everything right, but he doesn't let, the corporate wing of the party run roughshod over him. There are other people, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, who are better suited for the leadership position. And I have no
And
idea
good old Bernie too, remember?
if, the institutional mechanisms in Congress would just keep the status quo the same in the CPC and there'd be no reform. But if you actually want the Congressional Progressive Caucus to be more than a joke, you can't allow any person to just join flippantly because they want to be shielded from the left. Like, this is obvious. So now what Pramila Jayapal and the CPC at large has done is piss off the entire left. The entire left is rooting for Nina Turner because she's somebody who actually does have leadership potential. She's someone who would fight vociferously for Medicare for all and not just co-sponsor it because that's what's politically convenient. So this is absolutely a betrayal. The CPC has betrayed the entire left. And I really hope that members of the CPC come out, defy this endorsement, and endorse Nina Turner over Shontel Brown. And I hope that the CPC actually gets pressed by members of the media as to what the fuck they're doing, because I don't even know, but this is embarrassing. Like, you're useful idiots for the Democratic Party's corporate wing, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
But are actually now members of the corporate Democrats. So basically, they're now just useless. They're now literally corporate Democrats now.
If you play dumb and you lose fights on purpose, oftentimes that's how you get, a better job in the Democratic Party, as David Sirota alluded to. But again, I'm not going to speculate. I do know
leadership. That's how Scott Morrison became my country's prime minister.
And your guys' elections are coming up next month, right?
Yep, that they are.
And when it happens, we need to cover it.
This is fucked up. Yep. And Pramila
and hopefully he loses.
Jayapal absolutely needs to explain why she's proud to endorse somebody who's a corporate stooge who supports Israeli apartheid and takes money from their super PACs and is very clearly cynically supporting Medicare for all so she can shield herself from criticism from her primary opponent.
I can't wait for Vosh and other stupid leftist idiots to make excuses for this crap. So, what do you have to say?
Pramila Jayapal has finally exposed herself as a corporate Democrat and careerist grifter. We got to go out there and destroy her reputation with the constituents so they'll vote her out.
Hopefully. Because, this is just unacceptable. There is no rational reason why you don't support Nina Turner. It is obvious. And you also don't have Shontel Brown. And
I hate to do this, but I'm going to say it right now. This should be a purity test for if you're a progressive or a corporate Democrat. If you don't support Nina Turner, you may not take corporate PAC money, but you are now a corporate Democrat, and it's open season on you. We can say whatever the hell we want to destroy your reputation with your constituents and get you voted in.
But Vosh will cry about that, remember? Because we can't have purity tests.
I hope he cries and gets banned again.
How could you?
There are actually some that I do support banning, even if temporarily, like Vosh.
So now, next up, it's finally time we cover it. How close was Trump trying to overthrow the 2020 election, as we still have the January 6th insurrection committee still doing that crap, and about Trump trying to take over. So we're now going to watch Kyle's video on it, as Trump's idiot kid had to reveal detailed plans of it. So let's see how close they were.
So Donald Trump, as all of you know at this late date, he has a bunch of loser fail sons. One of them strikes me as significantly dumber than the others, though. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. And the doofy one, the one who clearly has the IQ of a ferret, he decided
I feel bad
to
for the
text
ferret
a detailed plan.
Compared to that. Have you no shame for ferrets? God forbid you say ferret instead.
How to overturn the 2020 election to Kevin McCarthy. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. This is in The Guardian. 2 days after the 2020 election, Donald Trump Jr. texted the White House Chief of Staff, it was Mark Meadows, with strategies for overturning the result. CNN reported, quote, "This is what we need to do. Please read it and please get it to everyone that needs to see it because I'm not sure what we're doing." Trump Jr. reportedly wrote, adding, "It's very simple. We have multiple paths. "We control them all." One leading legal authority called the text a smoking rifle. CNN said the text was sent on November 5th, 2020, 2 days before Joe Biden was declared the winner of the election and the next president. 2 months after November 5th, on January 6, 2021, supporters Trump told to fight like hell in his cause attacked the U.S. Capitol. A bipartisan Senate report connected 7 deaths to the riot. So they continue to say, according to CNN, in his text to Meadows, Trump Jr. laid out strategies the Trump team went on to pursue as they disseminated lies about election fraud and pressured state and federal officials. Such tactics included lawsuits in swing states, the overwhelming majority of which were rejected, and having a handful of Republican state houses put forward slates of fake Trump electors. CNN also said Trump Jr. suggested that if such measures didn't work, lawmakers in Congress could dismiss the electoral results and vote to keep Trump in office. In the immediate aftermath of the Capitol riot, 147 Republicans in Congress voted to object to results in key swing states. Wow. Okay, so just to be clear, this was well before, January 6th, and this was when Biden still hadn't been declared the winner. But at that time, the tides were turning, and you were getting, the rumblings of the conspiracy starting already about, well, hold on, Trump was leading all night on election night, and then how the hell did Biden end up coming back to win the next day? But again, for anybody who followed this stuff closely and bothered to educate themselves in all the details, you would have known. And go back and look at what I said when I was on Rogan's election special. I was warning everybody. There's this red mirage scenario, which is very likely because the votes that come in on election day get counted first. And so it's going to look like the Republicans are doing better than they are because it's a well-known fact historically that Republicans like to vote more on election day. And so that was biased in favor of the Republicans. But then when the mail-in votes are counted, they're historically very biased in favor of Democrats. People who, do the mail-in votes for whatever reason, they're more inclined to vote Democratic. So this is just standard demographic analysis stuff. It's the same reason that when rural votes come in, they usually are more biased in favor of Republicans. When the city comes in, that's more biased in favor of Democrats. So if you count the votes in a certain way, it's going to give off an impression which is not the end result. And so I warned in advance. I was talking about it during the election, just so everybody knows it's going to look like Trump's doing a lot better than he actually is. And then as more votes come in, Biden's going to be the one who takes lead.
And that was made worse by Republicans because a lot
mongering about in 49 states, the Republicans were fear-mongering about mail-in ballots.
It's not.
Here's the thing: Trump almost took Arizona based on the mail-in votes.
Mm-hmm. But not only that, because remember we actually covered it. A lot of Republicans in a lot of states made it so the mirage would happen, where mail-in ballots were not allowed to be counted until after the election was over. That way the red mirage could happen. They can use that as the excuse of, it was stolen from Trump. Whereas states like Florida, they had set where mail-in votes were already counted. That's why Trump won Florida on the same night, whereas everyone else took a long time to figure it out because they made it set up so the red mirage would happen so they could say it was stolen from us. So the red mirage, they knew about and they were cahoots to do it, so make it look like it was stolen from them.
So as those tides were turning, as the result was shifting,
like if they did it like how Florida did, where everyone was counted that night, Biden would have won that night.
That he would have.
Homeboy immediately starts talking to other Republicans, other official high-level Republicans. Are like, okay, so what are our options if this thing doesn't go our way? What are our options to try to flip it? What are our options to just take it? Well, look, we have our hands on the levers of power, so here's the potential options we can use. And they're floating this stuff as if it's, as if it's casual, as if it's nonchalant. And I will say, originally I was skeptical of the January 6th commission because it seems like almost just like a waste of time. Just a way for Democrats to get their message out there without substantively addressing policy that improves lives.
And I'm honestly sure that's part of it
so
too.
It's sort of like a theatrical virtue signal about how we're better than the Republicans. So, and in some ways, I still believe that that's effectively what they're doing with the January 6th commission.
Yeah,
but on the other hand, there has been a number of things that have come out which are genuinely terrifying, and people have a right to know. Like, for example, there were a number of different memos in the White House being floated casually, talking about here are the ways that we can keep Trump in power even though he lost. After he actually lost, there were memos talking about that. And one of the suggestions was just declare martial law. declare martial law and seize the voting machines. How are you just casually, openly talking about this? We know that Ted Cruz had agreed, I will argue in front of the Supreme Court, that the election was rigged and that Trump should stay in office. Ted Cruz agreed to that.
And
he agreed
to
it.
Impeached for it.
Now, the fact of the matter is, as all of you know, it never got that far. Why didn't it get that far? Because the case was preposterous. Understand something, guys. There were over 60 court cases.
Since you're involved
so
in
it's not like, the grievances weren't heard. Of course they were heard. They were heard over and over, and they were smacked down at every single turn. I think Trump only won like 1 or 2 of 60-plus cases.
And all of those were just simply about distancing for the poll watchers. Like it was before, like dozens of feet away, but then they were able to knock it down to 6 feet. But that's all that he won.
And in the cases he won, nothing hinged on it. It didn't flip the results in any particular state. Now, this is where, some of the hardcore MAGA types would say, yeah, but the courts are rigged and they're all run by Democrats. Nonsense. There were Republican judges that laughed Trump's case out of court.
And the Supreme Court, too.
But it gets even deeper than that. There were Trump-appointed judges that laughed Trump's case out of court.
Oh,
they lost over and over and over. They did a whole audit in Arizona.
Anyways.
And the audit found not only did Biden win Arizona, he won by more than we thought he won by on election night.
Oh, no. Well, it was
you had your day in court. Everything was heard out. Basically, you have in Trump Jr. and the rest of these ghouls, what you have are people who create their political opinions based on, like, reading Facebook memes made up by some douchebag in their basement. And this was the open talk that was going on, man.
Boomers and older Gen Xers
far be it from me to ever give Mike Pence credit for anything. But the fact of the matter is, and we now know this because of detailed reporting after the fact, he was under a lot of pressure from Trump and everybody else. When all else had failed, they said, look, when they go to certify the election, Mike Pence, you could reject the certification. You can reject it. And so there was a lot of pressure put on him. Like, reject
1% spine.
Not only did he not do it, he couldn't even if he tried. So, coat more.
Go out there and make a...
It's pretty bad, too, that Democrats are actually, like, praising Pence for doing something that's, like, that's not really praiseworthy. He's just acknowledging that he can't do it.
Big stink of it, make a big show of it, say, I reject certifying this election because Donald Trump won. And Mike Pence not only stood up and did the right thing under immense pressure to do the wrong thing, but he also was in contact with a bunch of conservative legal experts who hadn't completely and utterly lost their minds. And they were like, of course you don't have the authority to do this. No, this is like a symbolic part of the process. We already know what the results are. We know Biden won. This is like a symbolic thing.
Yeah, like all that shit like January 6th and the counts like back in December, that's all just like ceremonial, everybody. It's not really official. Like the official is the election results. That's the end of it.
You can't. We're going to stand up and cause a constitutional crisis when there's less than no case on Trump's side. And so that's what led to the ultimate split up between Trump and Pence. And now Trump thinks Pence is a cuck and, whatever. He sold out to the deep state. Now, if Trump runs again, which looks likely, he's not even going to have Pence as his running mate. But now this is what was going on behind the scenes. These absolute losers and clowns were coming up with all these plans. Here's how we can remain in power, even though we just lost. So it was like just openly flirting with the idea of a coup. And I am no fan of Joe Biden. I'm one of the harshest critics of Joe Biden from his left. But the stuff they were talking about was mental. This is mental. And of course, his fail son, like at least some of the other figures involved, they're
as you can see, the stupidity
they're intelligent
runs well
enough
in the
to sort of
family,
cloak what they're saying and hide it behind a veneer of
In fact,
respectability or
somehow,
use unofficial channels to communicate.
Somehow, Don Jr. is even dumber than his dad.
That's pretty damn sad.
Trump Jr. is just a moron. He's just like, how can we steal it if it doesn't go our way? Let's talk about that. And I remember there was an article, I think it was in Axios, where they described a meeting that was going on when Trump had, learned that he lost. There was a meeting going on, and there was basically a heated argument in the White House. It was a article that was, riveting in many ways, where you had like the Lynn Woods and the Sidney Powells, who are just absolute lunatics. They literally think like Venezuela hacked into our voting machines to keep Biden president. What? Those people were arguing, and Michael Flynn, they were arguing with some other people who were on Trump's legal team, whose names escape me at the moment. They weren't big names. They weren't very public names. But every single time the Lynn Woods and the Sidney Powells and the Mike Flynns would raise some preposterous objection, they would have to be slapped down aggressively by these other lawyers who were like, do you even understand what you're saying and what you're asking for? And that the claims you're making, there's no evidence of it, and we haven't won a single fucking court case, and you're still saying we should try to steal the election and keep him in power. Like, what is wrong with you? What has happened to you? And that's how close we were, man. The whole point of talking about this story is that's how close we were to somebody actually trying to stay in power when they lost the election.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. It's astonishing and it's terrifying, but leave it up to one of Trump's fail sons to talk about it in the least sophisticated, dumbest way possible where he gets caught. At the end of the day, though, I don't know if there will be any, official punishment or indictments or whatever, jail time for any of this stuff. Because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that American elites can escape responsibility come hell or high water. It's happened time and time and time and time again. So I don't really expect much to come of this practically and in terms of criminal justice, but at least all the facts need to be out there so we know what went on. And you just, at this point, you just got to hope, because Trump's going to run again and he's one of the favorites. Just got to hope he doesn't get into power again, because this stuff is, I hate like the weird hyperbolic over the top rhetoric of like, our democracy is in danger, yes. But like on some real shit, it sort of was. It sort of was. Not to say that it's a functioning democracy in the first place, because at this point, we're kind of an oligarchy with how it works and all the corruption and all the politicians bought off, et cetera, et cetera. But this would have been a level above and beyond when they're floating a coup and they were like a pubes hair length away from actually doing it.
Ever since
So, what you gotta say about how close it was?
Yeah, it's pretty close. Not good.
And this is why I said from the very start, anyone involved with this, especially January 6th, every single Republican, all need to be impeached. End of discussion. Yeah. Like, you guys try to overthrow the democracy and be treasonous. And that's why you all need to get the boot out of Congress and all that. And also be barred from running for president ever again, too. Alright, so now, on to the last topic, finally. As we covered it in the last episode, this one I was torn between which video to play beside this one. So we covered in the last episode about how Amazon workers in Staten Island formed a union and all that, and oh my goodness God, Amazon and all like the big mega corporations are freaking out, just like conservatives freak about gays right now. They are going insane to the point Starbucks is also having a meltdown too about it. So let's see how crazy their CEO is gone at the thought of, workers wanting better rights and shit. Something so bad.
So we have to talk about the Starbucks workers and what they're doing across the country.
And before I mention too, me and Mike talks about it, the other video I wanted was, we covered it in the last episode about like the Amazon workers and how like AOC didn't show up and anything like that. The main person who organized the Staten Island Amazon workers was on Tucker Carlson the other night, and let's just say Tucker's face was not in a good shape after the destruction he had to face.
I don't even know how to describe what they're doing, but I do know for sure that all of their activity demonstrates beyond a shadow of a doubt that labor is back, and at this point I feel as if we're on a trajectory to make labor and the labor movement, more broadly speaking, in this country stronger than ever. So it wasn't long ago when Chris Smalls led the first...
And like I said, I hate to say it, but I'm sure COVID had like a positive benefit for that, as much as it cringes to say it.
Amazon warehouse to a union. But Starbucks workers back in November in Buffalo, New York at a store, they voted to form the very first union in the company's history. And that was only the beginning, because now there is a company-wide effort to unionize. Now, earlier this month, the flagship Starbucks location in New York voted to unionize. Just this week, 2 stores in the Boston area voted unanimously to form unions. And we're to the point where 18 stores have voted to unionize since that first store unionized in Buffalo, New York in late 2021. And more than 200 plus stores are now fighting to unionize in 30 different states.
Hell yeah.
200 plus Starbucks locations are fighting to unionize.
Keep coping
Now,
too.
all of this is
Right.
happening
I've
despite one of
seen
the
more
most
with all of
intense
that. Keep
union
going.
busting campaigns in decades. This is according to In These Times. But since that article was published back in late March, the number of stores trying to unionize doubled. So just stop for a moment and appreciate that. Starbucks is doing everything in their power, even firing union
I hope
organizers
they're
at
having-
particular locations,
I hope
closing
someone
down
uses
stores,
Nightmare in
and
their dreams.
the union effort is growing. It literally doubled in the span of
Or would
a
Dream
couple
Eater
of
be
weeks.
worse for you?
It's absolutely insane. And the company at this point is so desperate that they're trying everything, including increasing benefits specifically for non-union workers. So as CNBC explains, Starbucks' campaign to dissuade baristas from unionizing could include extending new benefits exclusively to non-union workers. The company's CEO, Howard Schultz, told U.S. store leaders this week that he is reviewing the coffee chain's benefit program for its workers. However, employees who work at company-owned stores that vote to unionize would be ineligible for those improved benefits, Schultz said. Schultz cited federal labor law and advice from the company's legal counsel in saying it would be illegal to extend benefits unilaterally with unionized locations in the equation. Under federal labor law, employers have to bargain with the union that represents their workers when it comes to changes in compensation, benefits, or other terms of their employment. But companies can still ask unionized employees if they want additional benefits. So, I mean, this is obviously a deliberate and cynical ploy to get any employee that was considering a union to not opt for a union. Because if the goal of the union is to get better pay and better benefits, well, then if the company's offering you this anyway, then what's the point of the union? Kind of makes the union unnecessary, right? Except, no. This is a union busting ploy. See, the reason why a union would still be necessary even if Starbucks did offer better benefits is because what these companies do is they'll say, okay, we're going to offer you healthcare, but this is only for full-time employees. So you've got to work at least 35 hours a week or 37 hours a week. And if you work that much, then we will make sure you have healthcare. The problem is that then they'll deliberately schedule employees for like 34.5 hours, and this is what they all do. So when I worked at Walmart, they would actually write you up if you went over your scheduled time, because then, under law, you have to be offered benefits if you cross into a certain hourly threshold per week. So this is obviously what they're going to do. They're going to say, hey, here's some new benefits that we're going to dangle in front of you, but we won't actually give them to you because you won't be employed full time. We won't schedule you enough to qualify for these benefits. I mean, they're full of shit. And this is why the employees are unionizing, because they see right through it. It's an embarrassing attempt to placate workers that I don't think is going to work, but Howard Schultz is trying to do anything because he's desperate. So more from CNBC on this. As the union push gains momentum, Workers United has alleged that the company has engaged in union-busting activity, including firing organizers, cutting barista hours at unionizing locations, and other forms of retaliation. In March, the National Labor Relations Board
Makes you wonder if that's grounds for a what was it? What's the term? Unlawful termination or something like that?
filed a complaint against Starbucks, alleging that it violated federal labor law by firing organizers at a Phoenix location. In his week and a half back at the helm of the company, Schultz has already been waging a more aggressive campaign against the union than previous CEO Kevin Johnson. Schultz has mentioned the union in public letters and speeches with workers, painting the push to organize as divisive and unnecessary. Quote, and while not all of the partners supporting unionization are colluding with outside union forces, the point is that I do not believe conflict, division, and dissension, which has been a focus of union organizing, benefits Starbucks or our partners, he wrote in a letter to employees Sunday. I'm sorry, but he is so full of shit. Now, I want to play a video. This is an interview from Democracy Now! With one of the first organizers of the very first store that unionized in Buffalo. Their name is Jazz Brizek, and they basically call Howard Schultz's bluff here, call out his hypocrisy and his hyperbole also, which I won't spoil that for you. But they say, Starbucks has this reputation of being this really progressive company. They're in favor of, LGBTQ plus rights, Black Lives Matter. But yet, when it comes to labor rights, the company literally views labor as an assault. They view unionization as...
Because they're neo-libs. That's why. That's why they care to social issues, because that'll make them more money. That's why they care to social issues, because that they view will make them more money. But God forbid...
but so long as they can keep their economic fascism.
But likewise, if advocating for social issues would make them less money, then all of a sudden they'll become fascists in that regard. It's all about making money.
As an assault. It's preposterous. So take a look at what this worker says about Howard Schultz, and then when we come back, I'll give you the additional context, because it truly is just absurd, and Howard Schultz is making a fool of himself. But let's listen.
It's been incredible to see this turn into this kind of national movement. I mean, we've had support from the beginning from partners across the country, and the first store to file after Buffalo was actually a Mesa, Arizona store whose manager was retaliated against for telling us exactly what all of these people coming into Buffalo were actually up to. And when Starbucks retaliated against her and fired her before she had the chance to finish her time at Starbucks after resigning, they were the first store to petition outside of Buffalo. But from there, it's been incredible. I feel like it's almost, I'm not even able to keep up with how many more stores have been launching. So it's incredible to see so many folks. And the first store in the South won a few weeks ago in Knoxville, which was really incredible. The Memphis folks are still, not only did Starbucks fire 6 out of the 7 person organizing committee, but they also have still delayed that vote from actually being scheduled with the labor board. But it's incredible to see more people joining and this movement growing. And I think we all know that that's how we're actually going to get the kind of contract that we can sign and that partners deserve, is by continuing to get stronger and show that despite everything, we keep overcoming that union busting and standing together in solidarity. And I mean, I think it's ridiculous that Howard Schultz is first this threatened by unions, because we've said from day one, you know, we're not doing this because we're opposed to Starbucks. We're doing this because we want to make Starbucks the best that it can be and the most sustainable that it can be. It says it's a progressive company that celebrates, you know, all of these other forms of activism,
one less
LGBT
penny for him,
rights,
and you know how much he values that one penny.
Black Lives Matter.
He's married to that penny,
and then
remember?
suddenly it's being assaulted by labor rights. So that doesn't make sense. That's not consistent with what the Starbucks says it is.
If he can't have that one penny, he'll be depressed.
But I think, you know, we've seen Howard come to Buffalo and make really inappropriate comparisons to the Holocaust, and now we're seeing him say that he's being assaulted. So I think, you know, he tries to acknowledge that it's a sensitive subject, but he's still really missing the mark on how to talk about it.
Yeah, so I love the enthusiasm there. I love how optimistic Starbucks workers are, because what they're doing is paying off, right? They're making their voices heard, they're staking their claim, and it's working. It's working. You have 2 stores just...
John Deere, remember last year? Amazon in Staten Island, and now Starbucks here.
This week, vote unanimously to unionize. You know Howard Schultz is shitting bricks. But they were correct. So when they said that he used the Holocaust analogy, he actually did this. I looked it up, so I'm paraphrasing here, but he was talking about why unions are bad.
Wow,
and he said, you know, in Germany, in concentration camps, not all of the prisoners would get blankets, and so some of the prisoners would share blankets. So Starbucks wants to be the type of company that shares blankets. Okay, so what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that the union organizers, Howard, are like the Nazis, or are you saying that Starbucks and the working conditions are comparable to concentration camps? Because you can interpret that in a multitude of ways, and either way, it doesn't look good for you. And he also called it an assault. We talked about this last week. I can't get over that. He actually said this is like an assault on corporations.
That's how the rich fucks think of it as.
Absurd.
They think you're
so
stealing their penny
one thing that I love about this isn't just how successful these unionized efforts are, but it's to see how these CEOs lose their fucking minds as the unionization effort spreads across the company and is successful. And if these Starbucks workers have taught us anything, it's that when one domino falls, the rest will follow, and I hope that that's true with the Amazon union. All it took was one Starbucks store to unionize, and now, just a couple of months later, more than 200 stores across the country are fighting to unionize. Now, we had one Amazon store unionize. Will others follow? I'm not sure, but what I do know is that this labor movement is really, really encouraging to see.
Yep, and this is what AOC and the rest of you progressives need to stop being a pussy about and support the movement like Bernie and Nina have done over the last years or so.
And anytime
Exactly.
you see a company lose their shit and fight this hard, use all of these tactics, and be that hyperbolic to fight unions, that goes to show you unions are very powerful, and there's a reason why these companies don't want their workers to form unions.
Because God forbid they lose that one extra penny. Oh, that was awesome. So what do you guys say about Howard Schultz waiting to have Dark Void used on him?
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, what's that? Howard Schultz needs to be Dark Voided and then have Nightmare used on him for 200 turns.
Man, that's a lot of HP you got there, Schultz. Jeez. Alright, so yeah, keep winning, unions across the country and the world too. Keep winning, keep the rich coping. We enjoy every single moment. It reminds me of when we had to laugh at Trumpsters years ago. Alright, after 2 freaking hours, we are finally done with this episode. So see you guys next week for episode 46. So see you guys then.